Hey everyone, welcome to Skein Spider and what is hopefully the fourth and final part of the Jigglypuff tutorial. Let's not waste any more time, grab your hooks and let's get started. Our next step is to pin everything in place. Personally, what I like to do is use pins as markers, so I mark out the rounds that I need and then I can pin all the features in place and just use those as a guideline. The ears, the top here is going to sit between rounds 9 and 10, so I've got my little marker there for the top. The bottom of the ear is going to sit between rounds 23 and 24, so if you go ahead and mark out each of those and then you can place the ears between them. The ears also, if you find round 1, the very first round, they sit just behind that. So you see here's round 1 and the ears sit behind it here. The eyes, I've got my guide markers here. The top one is between rounds 16 and 17 and the bottom one is between rounds 27 and 28. So to find your guidelines, all you need to do is count out from round 1. So you know this is round 1 here, and then count each row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. until you get to the one you need. Place your pins. Now with the eyes, make sure that number 1, your pupils are sitting at the same height. You don't want one pupil out here and one pupil down here. I mean, you could do that if you wanted to, but for Jigglypuff, I'm going to have them in the same spot. And also make sure they sit approximately 6 stitches apart. That may change a little bit depending on the curl, but we'll get to that in a moment. The arms, the top sits between rounds 27 and 28, so it's the same round as the bottom of the eye, but it sits about 4 stitches back from the eye. So if you count out from roughly the side here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and align the arm there, the bottom of the arm sits between round 36 and 37. It's my little guide marker here. With the arms, make sure you stuff them lightly before you pin them in place. Make sure your arms look even. I think that looks pretty good. And next is the legs. The legs don't really have a round placement. It's all up to your Jigglypuff, how big the body is, how firmly you stuffed both it and the legs. So with my legs, I've placed them just behind the very last round we did, angled outwards, and I've pinned them about, I'd say 5-6 stitches apart. That makes them centered with both the eyes and the arms. Now my Jigglypuff leans back a little bit. I don't mind that too much. If you want it to be balanced, move your legs back further. The reason I have them so far forward is I want to be able to see them. With the legs, I've also pinned them about a third to half of the way up because that's where we're going to sew around. We're going to sew that much of the leg onto the body. The last thing we need to attach is the curl. Now with the curl, it should be looking something like that to begin. We're going to take the end and with our wire in it, we're going to push the curl up into the body. Now eventually we're going to sew that end to the side here so it stays curled up. But for now, we're going to take our wire and we're going to insert that into the body, making sure this last row is in line with rounds 7 or in between rounds 7 and 8. So that's this guide marker here. So I'm going to insert that into the body, probably there, push it through. Now make sure the main part of your curl is stuffed firmly. Don't worry about the row end, so this part here for now, because when we've sewed this on about 3/4 of the way, then we're going to add more stuffing. So push that down, till the end of the row is in line with round 7 and 8. We're going to pin that in place. Now the curl should be sitting in between the eyes. So you may need to angle it a little bit. Or if you don't like, let's see, the look of that, you can also move your eyes out further or in closer. It depends how big you've crocheted everything. So I'm just going to pin the rest of the curl on. Okay, now go ahead and sew on the ears, the eyes and the arms using the exact same technique we used to sew the inner ear to the outer ear. The curl and the legs, we're still using the same technique, but we're changing up the way we sew it a little bit, so I'll leave those till last. When you've finished sewing on the ears, the eyes and the arms, we're going to do the legs. I've already done one, but I'm going to show you how to sew on the second. The technique remains the same, so we're doing the same thing as we did for the other parts. The only difference is the legs are a closed piece. With the ears, eyes and arms, they were all open pieces, so we had the little V's exposed and we could work into those to sew them on. With the legs, we're going to treat the stitch or the space between the stitches and the space between the rounds as if they were those exposed little V's. So we start off the same way, go into the body and across over one stitch, pull through, and then instead of going back up under the V of the stitch, we're going to go into the leg, into one stitch, and then out the stitch above it. Pull that through, and the same as we were doing before, we're going to go back into that same stitch that we emerged from on the body, across one stitch, pop out underneath the next round, which is the stand-in for the little V stitches. Again, go into one stitch, pop out from the stitch above it, pull through, back into the body from the same stitch you emerged from, across one, and just repeat into the stitch of the leg and pop out one stitch above it. You're going to continue doing that for about a third of the height of the leg, and then you're going to pull the leg forward, sew across in a straight line, then you're going to sew down the other side until you get back to your starting point. All that remains to do now is to sew on the curl. We're going to do this in steps just to make it a little bit easier. The first step is going to be to sew the back of the curl here onto the body between rounds 7 and 8. So you should have your pins in, or you've got a marker in, so we're just going to sew that on first. We've finished sewing on the back of the curl, so this part here is still open, as is the rest. What we're going to do now is take a pin, and I want you to make note of where you made that last stitch. So I've made it in this one here, this stitch here. What we're going to do now is attach the end of the curl to the side of the curl here, so it stays nice and tight. The reason we're doing this next is because depending on how tight you pull your curl in, that will change the angle at which you sew the side on. So all we're going to do is take our needle and then thread it up through the curl. If I can ever get it out. There we go. It's pretty much exactly the same as we would do to weave in the tail ends after we've finished sewing on a piece. So we're just going to weave that down the curl. Weave it all the way down the curl until you can push the needle through the center of round one. So you should, I'm just going to go out the side again. You should push the needle straight out through the middle. Like that. Leave that for a second. What we're going to do now is curl the tail end around. Decide where you want it to sit, how tightly you want it curled around. And once you've got that figured out, you're going to push the needle back through the body so it emerges out on the other side. And then pull really tightly. Okay, so we're pulling tightly, and you want to keep as firm a hold on that as you can. And what we're going to do now is go back into the body, into the same stitch that the yarn is coming out from. And we're going to push back through the body of the curl, this part. Again, pull tightly. It doesn't matter if you can too much if you can see a bit of yarn through there, because we'll fix that up later. We'll sew that together at the end. And what we're going to do now is push our needle through the curl and then go back into the body of the Jigglypuff, not of the curl but of the Jigglypuff itself. And you're going to push your needle back out through where your marker is. So where you did that very last stitch to sew the back on, we're going back out through that stitch. And we can remove our marker now, we don't need that anymore. Again, pull tightly, pull everything together. Now that your curl is curled up, you need to try and center it between the eyes. So mine's pretty much in line. Just go ahead and move it when you're happy with the placement. Pin it down. Now to sew on the rest of the curl, for the exposed stitches we have left, sew them on as normal. When you get to the main body, you can sew on the entire thing. We're going to do that the exact same way that we sewed on the legs, so using the spaces in between both the stitches and the rounds as if they were our little V's. So you can sew each round on individually, or you can do a couple of stitches, insert your needle into the body of the curl and go say 3 or 4 down, do 2 or 3 more stitches, again go through the body, do 2 or 3 more, because you don't necessarily need to sew on the entire thing, just enough to keep it in place. So whichever way you choose to do that, up to you, but go ahead and sew that on now. When you get to the end of your curl, If you can see the little bit of yarn that you used before, if it's loosened up, just push it in to the body of the curl here and put a couple of stitches in the top. Continue sewing up the side. When you get back to where the rows begin, so the exposed V stitches, stop there because we're going to add a little bit more stuffing. Add some more stuffing. You don't need too much, just to bulk up the curl a little bit. When that's all done, finish sewing along the corner, weave the tail end into the body and snip it off. Our final step is to give our Jigglypuffs a smile. What we're going to do is skip over one round beneath the eye, so skip this one here, and then centered in the second round below the eye, 9 stitches apart, you're going to place 2 markers. So in the first stitch, place 1 and count 7 stitches in between, and then in the 9th stitch, you're going to place the second one. Centered one round down, so again, skip around, skip this one here. In the center of your stitches, we're going to place another one. You're going to thread your needle with some black yarn or embroidery thread, whatever you want to use. And from the side, off to the side of the smile somewhere, go into the body and then push the needle through to that first stitch marker. Take that out now. You're going to pull through and leave hanging outside the body a long enough tail that you'll be able to make a knot with it. From there, you're going to go into the bottom marker. Take that out. And then from the bottom, you're going to go straight up into that second top marker. Push through and then pull firmly so that this part of the smile lays flat. Make sure your tail doesn't pull through. Then we're going to go from the second top marker back down to the bottom one. And from there, we're going to go out of the original stitch that we went into. Once again, pull nice and tight. Alright, if you're happy with the way that the smile looks, if you don't like it, you can go ahead and move your markers to wherever you want them to be. When you're finished with your smile, all we're going to do is tie off a couple of times, nice and tight. 2 and 3 knots. Snip off the tails fairly close to the knot. And then grab a crochet hook. I like to use a smaller size than whatever I use to crochet the body. So this is what? This is 2.5. All you do is insert it into the body, come up to the stitch that has the knot in it, grab the knot with the head of the hook, and then just pull it through. And you can hide it in the stuffing. And with that, our Jigglypuff is finished. Thank you for watching, and an especially big thank you to anyone who stuck around for all 4 parts. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you guys next week.